Like I said, please send us your information if you haven't already done so, either in the Zoom chat or through menti.com, and use the code that's posted above. You'll see this code on the next few slides in case you're just now logging on. So we're going to go ahead and go straight into introductions. I am Krista Ofstedal, and I am the Project Echo Director here at NDCPD at Minot State University. And on our team today, we have Jody Patchen. Jody, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jody Patchen. I'm the admin for Project Echo.
Thank you. And Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Reiswig. I'm a research associate and mentor coordinator at MSU.
Thanks, Jessica. And Kyle.
Hi, I'm Kyle Erickson. I'm a research associate. Sorry.
And Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda Anderson. I'm a research associate at the University of Minnesota's Institute on Community Integration.
And we also have Jen.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Hall-Landy, also at the University of Minnesota as a researcher. I'm also a former direct support professional. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you. And if you haven't done so, can you please make sure that you are muted in case there's any extra audio. All right, so we will go ahead and introduce our speaker for today, Mark Olson. Mark currently holds the position of Project Coordinator and Education Specialist at the Institute on Community Integration, where he provides training to people who provide direct support. Throughout his career, he's provided support to people with disabilities in recreation and inclusion, residential and daily living skills, vocational skills, and self-advocacy. Mark has also managed frontline support teams, provided individual and policy advocacy, and staff development training. Key areas include active support, person-centered thinking and coaching, and direct support ethics. He has served as the board president of the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, chair of the American Heart Association Advocacy and Community Impact Committee. He is also the chair of the City of Richfield Human Rights Commission. He is a John F. Kennedy Jr. Award recipient, along with another founding member of NDA SP. His personal mission is to assist direct support professionals to gain skills and possess the tools needed to assist anyone they support in the life that they choose. Please help me welcome Mark.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's really important to get those letters right. And okay, I just got a little thing. To get those letters right, because if you don't use the NADSP, you end up in a whole different place, which is not a very nice place. So National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals is the organization. And yes, I've spent some time in leadership with that and was one of the founders. So anyway, today I'm here to talk to you about communication. And what I'm going to share is a few strategies that I've used, and they've been successful. But they're also strategies that, are a knowledge piece that I'm bringing, but you all come with some knowledge too. You all come with a lot of experience. And so there will be times when I will be giving Krista her exercise as far as online work goes, because I'm going to ask some questions now and again for you to answer in the chat so that, I can get a feel for what's going on with you and where you actually come to use some of the pieces that I'll be sharing. Now, I did notice in a couple of the people that were posting in the chat through Zoom that we have a real range of folks involved. This was originally designed for folks that are providing direct support, but I consider people that provide direct support to be anybody that's doing at least 50% of their work in service or in support. So, there are a lot of frontline supervisors that would be a part of that group as well. They may have that supervisory role. They wear that hat at times, but they also are still providing that direct support to the individuals with disabilities. So, next slide, please. All right. The goals for today's session, in my eyes, are this. You're going to have goals that you're coming with, and hopefully I will meet some of those as well. If during the course of this, you don't hear something that you'd like to know more about, please put something in the chat. Put your questions in the questioning session piece, those types of things, and we'll see if we can get to some of those as well. So some things I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit defining the types of communication. There's a whole blend of things that are a part of how we all communicate that I'll get into a little bit. I'll discuss styles of communication a little bit, and we all have our own styles. One thing that I oftentimes will think about that is, everybody has people in their lives who are very direct and would want to know things right then and make decisions right now. And we have others that maybe are not as direct or might need time to process before they can really react and add to a conversation. So those are kind of two things that are real common ones that you'll see out there. And some people are kind of in between. They can do a little bit of both. And what I'm going to be proposing is people look at where their strengths are and look at where the ones are that they want to grow a little bit in and figure out how they can use each of those. Review the importance of listening actively. A lot of communication is that. It's listening. And it's one of the things that we oftentimes are the weakest at, because a lot of times we are thinking to respond and listening to respond rather than listening to really understand. And so I've got a couple exercises, or a slide or two that talks a little bit about that. I will be asking for, when I get to the one slide, for someone to work with me on a little demonstration. If you feel like you want to open your mic and do that, when we get there, I'll ask, and, be the person that raises your hand, and maybe we'll pick you. And then I'll share a method for resolving conflict. It's just one method. It's a method that is really a basic, straightforward method that many times, if you really apply it and think about it creatively, you can make that a help with that. And then we'll apply the learning to specifically communication with supervisors, since that is the one thing that I know that Chris had shared with me that people wanted to really focus on, is that communication between supervisor and the person that they're supervising. So let's continue on. So next slide. I love this picture. Really, it's all about kind of how we support others. And that communication, if you look at this picture, you're seeing some definite communication going on there. You're seeing one of the things that I think is the most important part of being able to communicate with people. And you're seeing a relationship. I mean, you look at the joy that the two folks are having in conversing with each other, and it looks like over a cup of coffee or whatever. And it's really about that relationship. And good communication often starts with developing a relationship and getting to know someone. So I always encourage folks to have, those little icebreaker type activities, and especially if you are a supervisor and you're working with your team, or if you are on a team and you want to propose and say, I'll be the person that kind of leads us in doing something like that each time, and then come up with just some fun little things that you can do to get to know your coworkers and your supervisors better, because oftentimes those relationships are the things that are going to help you be better at supporting each other. Next slide, please. Okay, there are basically a series of types of communication that we all use daily. And, we all at some point use things that are verbal and nonverbal. Think about those as probably the two key pieces of communication that we often employ. And the one hint I say on that one is think about which one is most of our communication. A lot of people might want to think it's verbal, but most of our communications comes from non-verbal means. Think about it. If you are talking with a person, or significant other, someone in your life, someone you're supporting, and you're having a conversation about, hey, let's go out and see a movie tonight. Oh, all right. What I mean, what you're getting a verbal cue, but you're also getting a lot more of a nonverbal cue based on the posture that I was just sharing. So we'll all run into those things. So I'm guessing people have all run into that type of a thing where the verbal does not meet with the nonverbal. Think about it from a parent perspective. If you're a parent and you ask your your son or daughter or whoever to take out the garbage, husband in that case maybe, but to take out the garbage, and they're in the middle of watching the sporting event or watching a movie or something. Yeah, I'll take it out. Do you think it's going to happen right then and there? Probably not. Their nonverbals are telling you that they're involved in something, but you can hopefully negotiate the fact that it will happen when there's a break or that type of a thing. Written and visual aids. We all have all kinds of written and visual aids. And one of the things that I think has become really a benefit, one of the few, there's benefits and there's not some things that aren't such benefits to these little things that we all have now, is that you can find great written and visual aid pieces on there. I mean, I've used oftentimes dictation has become a thing that I can use when I am not able to sit and type things in. The phones have gotten so good at understanding different dialect that you oftentimes can have it come in real time and you don't even hardly have to edit it before you send a message to somebody. And so it can be a really great thing. Now, other visual aids might come in handy. I know when I've supported people that do not use words to communicate, one of the things that I oftentimes would use is, some type of a visual board aid or something like that, where people can use an eye gaze or something like that. If there's not the ability to communicate in any other way, you find that way to make communication happen. The key part of any communication situation is listening. And I'll spend some time talking about listening and give you some great concepts and things you can do about listening. And then the other part of communication is definitely behavior and action. Behavior is an action. When someone exhibits a behavior or does some sort of action, you can learn from that particular piece that something's going on in their life that may be impacting how they're going to take action on any given thing. Happens at all levels, happens with all people. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so verbal communication. Verbal communication, if you see me looking to the side, that's where I keep my notes because I have a second little screen. There's some things you want to know when you're going to do some verbal communication. So how does that person process things? I talked earlier a little bit about that, how some people can process like that. And I envy people that can process like that. In fact, I've started doing improvisational comedy on the side so that I can exercise that particular muscle in my brain that makes me kind of think a little bit more quickly, because I'm usually the person that kind of has to think things through a little bit. But with our knowing that processing piece can be a really key part of it. Knowing people, how well do people hear? All of those things come into play. I know that as I've aged, and this is just kind of the natural plant process of things. I maybe don't hear quite as well as I did when I was younger. Maybe too many concerts or whatever. But it's one of those things that you want to know about the person you're communicating with. How well are they hearing you? This is one that I use. It's very, very important with people we support, but I think it's important for everybody, and that's how we address people. Address people in a way that they want to be addressed. Obviously somebody making something silly up might not be the way, but it may be the way in a certain relationship. But address me by my name. That's the thing that I like to be called the most. Some people might be. They might have gone to school and they really are tied to a PhD, or they're tied to, whatever it is. So they might want to be called doctor this or doctor that. What is the chosen label that the person has? And again, it comes back to the individual, not something that you come up with, but the individual. And that happens across the board, not just for people we support, but definitely we need to think about that when it's people we support. But, think about your teams. If you're a supervisor or you're on a team, what does your supervisor like to be addressed as? Odds are in this field, because most of us are or have, been real people persons all the way through, is it's usually a name. It's usually those things are kind of the thing that are really the piece. You don't really look at that hierarchical way quite as often, but sometimes you might run into a situation where you need to do that. You need to pay attention to that, because that helps you build the value of the person and show that you give them that respect. But it also gets them to respect you a little bit more too. And I'll talk about power differential on one of our upcoming slides, which really is one of the key pieces with that. So, all right. So let's move on to the next slide. Nonverbal communication. Now, nonverbal communication is probably, like I said, it's where most of our communication happens. I think that there was a statistic in some study, and this is the typical researcher. Well, there was a study done about that, but there was one at one point about how much of our actual communication comes just from the words we share, and how much comes from all the different things that are a part of us and how we do things. So, appearance and clothing, and hairstyle, and choice of colors. That's a communication piece. How do you dress? I know when I'm going to be presenting, like in front of a large group of people, or a group that has more of that professional focus in the way they do things, I'll probably wear a sport coat, a tie, those types of things. I'll dress for the part of what I'm doing, because that's important that appearance is there. I will always, though, because of who I am, and this is where your individual style comes in, I will always have something that's just a little bit different. So if I'm wearing a tie, it's going to be a fun, funky tie. It's not going to just be that tie that's got the stripes on it. I'm not going to be wearing my Harry Potter, golden burgundy tie kind of thing. That's just, like a school tie. No. I'm going to have something fun. And maybe it's oh gosh, who's that musician that I'm thinking of that was in the Grateful Dead? Anyway, he great artist, but I'll have an artistic tie. We have an artist that works with us, Jimmy Reagan, who is an artist who lives with autism, and he has some ties that he's made that are just really colorful and beautiful. I will have things that will add a little bit of style and panache. That's part of my appearance thing. Gestures and hand movements. You're seeing me doing a lot of that right now. It's a part of our communication. And it shows an investment when you're using gestures and hand movements oftentimes. Now, some people like to keep their hands really quiet, and there are some situations where I would be very, especially in a negotiation process, I might be very focused on keeping my hands from moving too much, because they can kind of be a tell in those types of situations. So it's like, if you're having a tough negotiation, you may kind of look at some of your nonverbals and figure things out. Think about playing a game of poker for anybody that's been a card player. A good poker player is always looking for other people's tells. Same thing happens when you're using gestures in a situation where maybe it's not something you want to give away. Facial expressions, smiles, frowns, other facial expressions. Sometimes that's the only way a person really can communicate. I mean, I know I've worked with folks that do not use words to communicate, and that will be a way that they'll communicate. In fact, right now my mother is experiencing some late life issues where she's not able to communicate any longer with her words. And she does do a lot through facial expression. We will know if she's enjoying the activity that we're engaging her in using active support terminology. And we will know right away if it's something she's really enjoying based on what her facial expressions are. Postures are always a big thing. You know, like if we're having a conversation and you see me kind of sitting back like this and that type of a thing, do I really look like I'm interested in what you're sharing with me? Probably not. But it's important to know that, you know, those different posture pieces can really be meaningful. So if I want to really portray that I'm listening closely, many times I will be sitting in more of a forward position, much like this. I will be having eye contact with the individual and or be really showing my engagement with the posture that I'm using at that time. Again, eye contact, movement of eyes, blinking, those are important things. Now, the one caveat I always bring up with eye contact is there are different cultural pieces that come in sometimes with eye contact. I know that a person, and it's not every person that lives with autism, but I know some folks that live with autism where eye contact is sometimes too much information. So to have a good conversation and to respect the way that they learn and the way that they will communicate with me is I may not have eye contact. I may look to the side. I may do the old Norwegian farmer thing. You know, some of you are from North Dakota and places like that, and Minnesota, where, you know, you're sitting next to each other like the two farmers sitting on the bench in front of the feed store, just having a conversation about the weather. They're sitting and chatting and talking, but oftentimes they're not even looking at each other. They're both looking off into the distance. Finding out what the person you're going to be communicating with uses for eye contact is a real important thing too. Paralinguistic, tone of voice, pitch, loudness, all really key parts of this. So now I'm going to show you a video, or I'm going to have, I think that's up next. Yeah, I am. Okay. And I want you to think about that. Now, this is a video from Friends TV show. Some of you will remember it for what it was, but it's going to go through some of those different things. And I'd like you to just kind of watch it and pick out where you're seeing the things. And then afterwards, we're going to open up the chat a little bit. And I'd love people to actually share with me what they experienced while watching that video. What were the things that really jumped out at them about those different communication pieces that we just talked about? So, Crystal, when you're ready, you can certainly give it a run.
And you're the father, by the way? You got it.
No, I could get him to forgive us.
I don't know.
I'm telling you. I can do it.
Yeah, he can do it.
He was like this crazy-eyed, hairy beast man. He was like a Bigfoot or a Yeti or something. Hi, just so you know, we didn't mean to fog you. We actually thought you were like a Yeti or something. Hi.
So you like the short hair better?
What? Yeti? Danny?
Thieves? Hello?
All right, and Krista, you can cut at any time now, and we'll just we'll call it. That's good enough. And so, what were a couple things that you saw there? Use the chat feature. What were some things that you saw in that video that kind of jumped out at you?
Well, just between those two friends in the hallway, well, I used to know the names better. I'm guessing one of them's Joey.
Yep.
And just the way he was a kind of a forward and trying to convince his friend that he really can do it just by looking at him and trying to convince him.
Yep. The posture piece was big there, wasn't it? He was really kind of, really getting in there and saying, yeah, I can do this. So yes, absolutely. One more. Did somebody else observe something that was really kind of jumping out at him in those handful of examples we had? There's more on that video, so I think that link is going to be available. So if people want to look at more, they certainly can, because it is kind of a fun video. But Did anybody have anything else that kind of jumped out from the couple that they had? One that jumps out for me in that one all the time is that that whole thing about appearance, where we have the gentleman that was big with the big beard and all of that, and they were like all over themselves to try and make him feel welcome without really making him seem welcome in the building. But then all of a sudden, once he shaved and cleaned up a little bit, all of a sudden there's an interest there, and that just kind of always makes me chuckle because it's something that happens. All right, so written communication, visual aids, and technology. We're on to the next slide. I'll just continue because, of course, I always plan for not enough time. And so just make sure this active listening. Now, active listening is a really important part of how we communicate. And here is, rather than do an interactive thing with someone else to show one, I'm just going to do a little exercise instead. Activity. Okay, so everybody be ready. I'm going to ask you a question, and it's going to involve some mathematics in there. So, not my favorite thing, but okay. Okay, pretend you're a bus driver and you work for the public transportation in whatever city or town you're in. You arrive on 10th Street and 10 people get on the bus. At the next stop, 5 people get off the bus and 4 people get on. At the next stop, 3 people get off the bus and 7 people get on. At the next stop, 4 people get off and 1 person gets on. Now here's a big question. What color are the bus driver's eyes? Krista put it never said, but it was said. What color are the bus driver's eyes? Wendy's got it because it's her eyes. Remember, I said, imagine you are the bus driver. We sometimes don't listen totally. We sometimes don't listen fully. We sometimes listen for what we expect to hear rather than what we should be hearing, or what we want to, or we look for what we want to hear rather than what is really being said. And that's one of the key things I like to talk about this. So, in listening, being an active listener, be attentive. Ask open-ended questions, and that's what my other exercise would be about, would be really asking open-ended questions, but you all kind of get that concept. You want to ask a question that makes somebody go beyond just answering yes or no. Ask probing questions, so probe deeper, dig a little deeper, peel the onion, as we would say in person-centered thinking. You want to try and peel the onion and get to know the person better because you're going to be able to support them better. Same thing goes for supervisory roles. Request clarification. Okay, if you're not quite getting it. Paraphrase, and a lot of times a paraphrase, what I love about paraphrasing is if you paraphrase when you're trying to listen for what somebody's telling you, paraphrasing lets the person have the opportunity, or gives them the opportunity, to correct you if you're wrong. If you didn't hear them correctly, by paraphrasing, you're giving them the opportunity to get it so that you're really understanding them better. And be attuned to and reflect feelings. I mean, if you're listening to somebody and they're telling you about something that's really traumatic in their life, I mean, you don't want to be just all happy and joy, joy, joy. You want to be reflecting kind of the feelings and the attitudes of what's happening in the conversation, because that shows empathy, and empathy is a real important part of any kind of listening that you're doing. And again, listening is the most important part of communication. All right, next slide. Trying to get this done in plenty of time. Okay, behavior as communication. All behavior serves a purpose. Think about it. Seeking or obtaining something, or avoiding or escaping something. Okay, I'm going to ask you to do something. Use the chat again here. All right. Start listing for me behaviors that you run across. What are some behaviors that you run across? And Krista, if people are doing some in the other chat, please open up and share with me. I got refusal, not listening, yelling, blaming. What are other things people do? Yelling and not listening, avoiding, not listening. A lot of people getting not listening or avoiding, ignoring, anger, loneliness, shutting down, repetitive talk. All right. Okay. Oh, I got one. Okay, I got to go back here. I got to go back. Was it Garrett? I think it was. Smiling. Thank you, Garrett. We often focus on the negative behaviors. We often don't look for the behavior that's being communicated or the communication that's happening through behavior or through an action that's positive in a setting. Find those positives and build from there. That's how good communication is going to happen, is if you're basing it on the positive pieces of what's there. Now, you're going to have some things that are going to be more negative that you're going to have to deal with, but always look for the positive. Next slide, please. I love this quote. Beneath every behavior, there is a feeling. And beneath each feeling is a need. So look at how this is building. And when we meet that need, rather than focus on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause, not the symptom. Applies definitely to people we support, but also applies in situations where you're struggling to communicate with coworkers and or supervisors. Because there's a feeling there that's going to be happening for everybody in a situation. And that feeling is going to be having a need to be resolved. And so when you focus on that, on what's going on, what the action is, you oftentimes will then be able to deal with what's causing something to be a struggle, rather than focusing on just what the struggle is. And that's really a key piece to it. Okay, next slide, please. I want to try and get this done in a reasonable time here. All right, so resolving conflicts. This is a great basic conflict resolution tool that we use. Identify a problem, brainstorm solutions. My key with brainstorming solutions is don't limit your brainstorm. You're not going to get to the point where you're saying, oh, that won't work. We want you to leave the that won't work stuff out of there. And I always say, when I'm brainstorming the solution, what would I do to fix this problem that's going to get me fired? And have that conversation with people. What would we do to get ourselves fired? And why I do that, it's not because I want you to get fired or I wanted to get fired either. It's that I want you to think creatively and outside of the usual realm of what you would do to deal with that particular problem. You can always take some of the things that you brainstormed that were a little bit out there, and when you start to agree upon your strategy, pull something back. So you might be able to take, something that was really kind of off the wall and say, okay, well, what of that's actually doable? And that might give you that agreed upon strategy that's going to be the thing that really pushes you forward. Then you implement that strategy, and then you evaluate and resolve. Okay. And now, next thing, evaluation often gets missed in that particular piece. This is a simple evaluation tool that I use when I do person-centered processes. And it applies anywhere, and it's a nice simple method. You can go and you can survey and you can do real major research into any of these things as you evaluate how something's working, but this is the simplest way, I think, to actually kind of go back and refocus yourself, and go back to another step if you have to in that process. Sit down and talk about what's working with folks. Talk about what's not working. Okay, what's next? What are we going to try next? There's going to be something about what worked that you can probably build on, and there's going to be something about what didn't work that you can probably set aside, or you can probably evaluate differently, look at differently, go back to what was the feeling or the need that had to be met there, and work your way towards a better solution. So next slide, please. I got to get to the right one. Okay. Communicating with supervisors. Okay. There's always a power dynamic with communicating with supervisors. We talk about setting boundaries, saying yes and or yes if, saying no. Next slide. Here's your sources of power. This is kind of a, this makes some good sense. There's sources of power that we all have. Now, we all have personal power. It's our personal characteristics. For some of us, it's charm. It's a passion for that topic or the subject or what's going on. We all come with some knowledge and skills that are part of our personal power. We all have credibility or a track record, a reputation, experiences, capabilities that people will value. And the other thing that we have is we all have networks and connections. That's one of my favorite sources of power is I do a lot of networking and connecting. And when I do that, I can find if somebody has a particular concern or something that they're really working on, I may know somebody. I can play that. I know a guy, or I know a person, I know a lady, and I can try and make those connections for people. Then there's positional power. People have different positional powers in organizations. So supervisors usually have a positional power that's there. But that positional power often comes back to what are the personal powers that they bring. And there needs to be a balance of discussion between supervisors and individuals about, okay, how do we all benefit from our personal power to make sure that we're all able to work within our positions to get to where we want to be. So again, it's about that relationship. It's about that whole concept of building that relationship. All right, let me see. Okay, we can go to the next slide. All right, saying yes is simple, or is it? It's simple to say yes, but a lot of times when you say yes and you're adding more information, more work to your own plate, that's not sustainable. I could go into a story, and I will actually be sharing this story next time, about how I kept doing that and it became not sustainable. So there's a little infomercial for next session that's coming up. And I'll be sharing that story as a case study. But just think about it. Saying yes is not just saying yes. Sometimes in order to protect your power and protect who you are in any kind of situation, you have to figure out how to say yes and or yes if. Or say, I've decided not to, and here's why. Or this is what I need in this situation if I'm going to be able to say yes. Oftentimes that's a balancing act. It's a balancing act of relationship between you and your supervisor, or supervisor and the person they support. But it's also a balancing act of trying to find what's going to work to get the job done. And oftentimes that involves some shifting of responsibility or some shifting of deadlines so that a person can say yes to a new thing. So that yes if is really a key piece if you really want to say yes, or even if you want to say no. Now, to say no, there's a simple way to say no is just say no. But oftentimes, if you're going to say no to your supervisor, you got to have some reason why you're saying no to something, and it might be, I'm sorry, but that's just not in my skill set. And I don't feel that I have the time right now to invest in building that particular skill. Or you could say, I would love to do that, but could I do that at a different time? That type of a thing. Now, I know when we're doing direct support, sometimes it's just a matter of you got to have somebody to do the work and you got to have it now. But really trying to find people and meet people where they're at and in schedules so that those things can work are really important. And it's also a matter of setting up expectations with each other. A lot of times setting those expectations are the thing that begins setting the boundaries between what you can and won't do. When I share my story next time, one of the boundaries I had to set for myself is I needed to make sure that I took some time each day to refill myself a little bit. And so I had that conversation with my supervisor, and a balance was made. It was like, okay, yeah, you're going to need to step away at lunchtime and do your own thing. If it's read a book for a little while, or, or go for a walk or something that gives me a chance to re-energize, so that I could do a better job when I came back. So yes, when you're going to say no, make sure that you're thinking about positional things too. Put yourself in the position of your supervisor or the person you support. All right, now let's we're shortening up on time here. So next slide. And now here's another simple evaluation that I like to use. And this is what I usually use at the end of my presentations. And so I'm going to share that for you, and then we'll move on to our case study person for today. And it's called a like, learn, and change. And I use this with a lot of meetings too, where, it's like, okay, what did you like about today's meeting? What's one thing you learned at today's meeting? So right away, you're setting up people to think about those positives. That's what's one thing you might change about today's meeting or today's training if I'm providing a training. It's all about giving yourselves the opportunity to not only find out what really went well for the people that you're working with, what things you've shared that they've been able to learn, but finding out how you can change to be a better person supporting them. So as a supervisor, a like, learn, change with your employees is a really good thing to do too, because if you're doing a like, learn, change, often enough about a project or about anything, you're going to come up with some great things that you can use in the future that will help you better communication, but also better produce as a team. So on that note, I will say I've had enough of the floor today, and thank you all. And I will throw it to Krista, and then she can introduce our case study person.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was fantastic. And this little simple evaluation, it's so simple. Like, how have I not stumbled across this at any point in my life? I think it's going to definitely change my conversations with my kids after school. So thank you. And also, I do love applying that to meetings. So resilience team, remind me, this is what we're going to do after our hub meetings from here on out. So we would like to introduce our case presenter for today. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to use Mentimeter or put them in the chat, and we will try to get to those at the end of the session. Our case presenter today is Hillary Liccini, who is with us at NDCPD. So Hillary, go ahead.
Hi, thanks Krista for inviting me to do this today. So I am the Associate Director here at NDCPD, and I'm also an assistant professor in our Department of Special Ed. But part of my role as the Associate Director is I really work very closely with all of our project directors and the people that they supervise. So a big part of my day that is not scheduled is people coming into my office and saying, do you have a minute? And it really is using all of those effective communications. And so I'm going to just give you a little snippet of kind of what my day looks like, and hopefully all of you can kind of relate to this and learn something from my brief experience. So next slide. I really love this quote: treat your employees as exactly as you want them to treat your best customers. So the people that they serve, you want them to treat them with the utmost respect. So you in turn need to treat them because you lead by example. Okay, next slide. So my first experience with my supervisor is kind of the opposite. It's a non-example, right? And it was this listen Linda moment. Her name was in fact Linda. My first job, I worked at a school right after I graduated from college. And it was my first IEP that I had to write in the real world, and I needed some direction. I had a really challenging caseload, and I went to her and I said, I wrote this, I drafted it. Can you kind of just take a look at it? And she really just wrote it off, ripped it apart, no communication. And from then on, really would question everything that I did. There was this level of, well, you asked, and I'm not sure that you know what you're doing, so now I'm going to micromanage you. So what I took away from that was two things. One, as an employee, it taught me I don't trust you to come, if I have a problem, to come to you as a supervisor because you're not hearing me. And the other thing it taught me later on, that as a supervisor, this is how I would like to treat the people that I supervise. And so it was really kind of one of those experiences. It was rough on me. And so what it taught me was, this is what I don't want to do. This is not the type of supervisor I want to be, because when I'm reaching out, trying to communicate, it wasn't effective because I wasn't feeling heard. So next slide. So in our center here, we really tried to create a culture of caring and a culture of, if you have a problem, we want to be able to discuss it. And so I always have an open door policy. My doors only close if I'm on a meeting or someone's in here talking with me. Sometimes we joke I should have like Peanuts Lucy outside her, it's 5 cents for your psychiatry session. I should just put a jar out there because people will come in. And so when they come in, and sometimes they're there just to, they need a moment, or sometimes they're really upset when they come in. And so I always try to preface it as, okay, are you venting or do you need more from me, so that I know how I can best support them? If you're telling me information that, maybe you are just venting, but really I need to do something with this, or do you just need to get it out, but really it doesn't need to go any further? And so that's how I always try to start those conversations, so that people are comfortable coming in knowing that it's a safe place, that if they do just need to vent, I will hear them. But also, if there is a bigger situation that they need more support, I'm also there to do that then too. And so my approach really is to just listen at first and see what they need from me. I have a sister who is a psychologist, and I tell her all the time, like, I just need you to listen. I don't need you to be my therapist right now. I don't want an advice of, well, this is what you should do. Like, I just want to unload for a minute, right? And so, like, I think sometimes there just needs to be that safe space where people can do that. But also as a supervisor, knowing where that line is, where maybe you do need to know more or do more. And that needs to be part of the conversation too, depending on what they're discussing. So next slide. So when I think about it as an employee coming to a supervisor, because I have wonderful supervisors here too, and that really has, from my supervisor down to me to the people I supervise, we try to have this sense of consistency of, this is who we are as a center and this is what we do. Mental health, family always comes first. We will figure out the job later, because that's our approach, and I think it's a wonderful approach, and we've been pretty successful with that. But just some key points that I jotted down, because I know we have a mixed group. Some of you are supervisors, some of you are going to your supervisor to talk. So for those who are going to their supervisors, from my perspective, it's always helpful when someone comes to me if they're honest with what they need. And so if you're taking the time to come, and you need something, I need to hear the whole picture. What truly is it that you need, so that our conversation can be purposeful and we can get a good result out of it. Have realistic expectations on the solutions that you come up with. We still have a job to do, and so we have to find that balance. And so coming in and having that conversation, feeling supported, but being realistic on what we can and can't do. And we might not be able to come up with a solution that day, and that needs to be the expectation. It might be a couple more meetings. As an employee coming in, offering those solutions, right? So if you're really struggling with something, I may not know exactly what you need, and you might already have a solution in mind. And that's helpful to me, because then I can see, how do we build on that? Or, okay, here's where you're approaching it from. And I may not have thought about that solution. And then have those productive conversations. Okay, next slide. So then as a supervisor, how can we help our staff? Pick up the slack. I think Mark said it in either these words or similar words. You can't fill your cup if your pitcher is empty. They can't fill the cup of the people that they serve if their pitcher is empty. So as your supervisor, how can I help you? And so I know that everyone's plates are always full, but if there's a way that I can say, okay, what can I do to support you this week? What can I take off your plate so that you can get through this? So in my first example, my Listen Linda, it was it still sits in my brain of how she as a supervisor didn't pick up the slack. So we always we did extended school year. So we would make our schedule for those children that we had in the summer. So as a department, we would sit down, we would make our caseloads. Linda would come in with her caseload pre-made, because she picked the kids, the easier kids, the kids she wanted. And the rest of us were left with the challenging cases. So as a supervisor, my philosophy is I would never ask someone to do what I'm not willing to do myself. And so if someone needs to be supported in that way of you picking up a little bit of that slack, or maybe it's not you, maybe it's another employee, but working to find that solution so that we have a short-term solution to get to that long-term solution. Okay, next slide. And so then I think, one of the last things to do is to make a plan. So if you or your employee need more, make that plan. And maybe you don't find that resolution that day, but you can say, okay, timeline, here's what this transition can look like to you, so we can get you to a spot that feels better for you. Or right away, okay, yes, immediately this needs to happen, and we will figure out the other stuff later. Every scenario is going to look different. It's also important to be able to know how to offer that community support. So if I have people coming in who are really struggling, I know I can say there are outside counseling services that through our university you have access to as an employee, whatever it might be. And it's not your job to make sure they get to those places, but it's important to know that those resources exist, because they might not know. And so as a supervisor, it's important to make sure that you have that as part of your plan. Make follow-up meetings if needed. I've had people come in and I say, okay, here's our plan. Next week, come back. Let's sort through it again. Let's see if you're in a better spot. Has this situation kind of resolved itself? Do we need to go in deeper? What does that look like? So I think it's always important to have follow-up meetings, or even if it's not a big thing that they've come to, that they say, the sky is falling and I need this. Maybe it is just one of those venting sessions, to maybe that next morning, pop down their office. How you doing today? Right. So I think following up in a big or a small way lets them know that they're supported, and they will come back to you again for those big or small things. And then lastly, just make sure that you're communicating as a supervisor, saying, I hear you, I understand. Here's what we can do from the job perspective. If this doesn't fit, right, it's okay to maybe take time off, or what else can we do? And then truly hear them. I think, like Mark said, it's that active listening. I think sometimes we start to hear things, and in my brain, I'm already thinking what I'm going to say to you next. I hear this snippet. Here's what I'm going to tell you. It's important to pause and communicate, and that's active communicating too. It's being in that moment and listening to get all that information, so that person feels respected and heard. And I think that's my last slide, but if you want to slip, yep. Perfect. So I hope that's helpful. I mean, this is such a large topic. And you know, we could do this for hours, and I'm sure everyone has their own examples of being a supervisor and communicating, or going to a supervisor and communicating. And so this is really just such a small snapshot from my perspective. And I'm not saying that mine's the only perspective, right? But these are the things that I have found helpful, both to me as an individual and also as a supervisor. So my email address is there if anyone has questions or wants to reach out.
Thank you, Hillary. That was wonderful. I just want to say Hillary threw this together in a very short amount of time. I realized we didn't have a case presenter on Monday and I ran down to her office. So that open door policy is not a lie. But I really liked your point on keeping your expectations, keeping realistic expectations. And another thing from like a supervisor standpoint is being transparent, so that, you know, if like we think that this is the solution and it's not, because maybe it doesn't fall in line with, I don't know, like policy or whatever, maybe there's a procedure in place that we're not aware of, so this simply wouldn't work, being transparent and explaining the why because of that. And I have noticed the center does a very good job of being transparent and explaining the why behind a lot of decisions, and it makes a difference. Is there any other questions? We're getting lots of thank yous for the great tips. Mark, I think we do have one question for you if you're willing to answer. We're actually on time today. I'm so impressed with us.
Yeah, sure. What's the question?
So do you have tips on assessing your personal power, like how to build confidence and acknowledging what you're good at and what you need to work on?
Ooh, that's that is a good question. Many times, a lot of the things are, if you just sit down and think about, okay, where are people responding to me? Like, what is happening? Like when people really get excited about, what I'm offering, how am I at that moment? What am I doing at that moment? So, my piece would be like, if I'm going to go to my improv example, just because it's what I've been spending a lot of time on in my off work time lately. And how is that other improv person responding to what I'm bringing to them? So it's a matter of giving gifts and getting gifts. And so it's just focusing on that communication to figure out what communication strategies you're using that are working. And that's going to tell you how you're powerful with your communication. What are the things that you do well? Now, as far as other power pieces, it's like you have power based on your own examples of, how long have you worked in the field? There's a certain amount of power with that. How, what have you done that's really been successful in the field? I one of my colleagues that I've worked with for years, she and I got a guy on a list for a kidney one time. That's some power that we used because we had personal knowledge that we could share, and we could approach that physician and say, hey, this person needs to be on this list just like everybody else. You can't make a decision based on the fact that they have a disability. No, they still are human. They still deserve to be on that list. So it's a matter of finding where you have knowledge and skills that are going to be beneficial to whatever is going on. So say it's in your work setting. Where are the things that you're really strong at? Are you really good at supporting people? I'm going to go back to direct support, because once you've done that, are you really good at supporting people in doing kitchen work and engaging them in doing their own cooking and their own things like that? That's a sense of personal power. So I don't know if I'm kind of giving examples is all I'm really doing here, but it's just like, where do you show skills and knowledge that are going to benefit others? And that's where you can build your personal power from.
Thank you, Mark. Well, I think that is time. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. If you could please fill out our session evaluation survey. I'm going to put a link to it in the chat, and I'm also going to pull up the QR code. But if you, I should have put this in the slideshow, my bad. We hope to see you at our next session, which is going to be on March 15th. So everybody take care. We hope you have a good rest of your week. And here is the QR code if you want to scan that with your phone really quick. And please let us know how we're doing. Can you see it, Jessica? Am I sharing something weird?
I'm just used to your pretty slide, so.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. And thank you, Mark and Hillary. Greatly appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure.
I love how comfortable people are using the chat. It's kind of intimidating when you're on like a Zoom call.